Today is day 5. We're going to cover ecological succession in our STAAR review. Make sure that you open up the notes sheet by clicking on it underneath the post for the Pear Deck. And again, we're doing a video because you might be displaced since there's English 2 testing today, and I don't know if I have you. But you still got to do your review because you still have a test. So ecological succession is the sequential or ordered appearance and disappearance of a species in a community over time. So generally, when a natural disaster hits an area, over time it will recover, and you can see the steps of it if you visit it every once in a while and just take a picture, and you kind of get to see like a time lapse. There are 2 main kinds of ecological succession, primary and secondary, and they are different. Primary succession is starting or changing an ecosystem from scratch, meaning that there's nothing living at the very start. You're starting from like bare rock. And then it's kind of like baking a cake if you're going to bake it from like scratch ingredients. No recipe, no nothing. Secondary succession is changing an ecosystem from an existing ecosystem that's already there, meaning that there are living things and then there's soil, so it's a lot easier to start and it's a lot faster to start. Kind of like if you're baking a cake from a cake mix, right? You're going to do it a lot faster because pretty much already prepared for you, set up for you. So just to focus a little bit more on primary succession, for example, it starts in a place with no soil. So lichen will grow as a first thing on the rocks because nothing else can grow on rock. Lichen is this symbiotic relationship, a mutualism between algae and fungi, so it can latch onto rocks and break down rocks for nutrients. And as the rock gets crumbled down a little bit and broken down, it becomes soil. As they make the soil, they themselves also die and kind of become the nutrients that are integrated with the soil. So it's kind of like a 2-in-1, although the soil quality is still kind of meh. Number 2, using that kind of soil that's been produced, mosses and ferns cannot grow. Now, there's not a lot of soil, but it's something. So things that have small roots and aren't really tall, like mosses and ferns, will then take root and grow. This is what mosses look like. They're a little bit taller than lichen, and they're technically 2 plants. Then we have, shrubs and trees that can survive. As the mosses and ferns are growing, they themselves are dying, decomposing, becoming fertilizer, enriching the dirt. And as that dirt gets a thicker layer, things that are taller like shrubs and trees can survive and grow. And then things that are going to live in that environment can now start to move in, including insects, small birds, and mammals. Now, the first thing that moves in is always going to be called the pioneer species. And it's called a pioneer because that's just a term we use for somebody who first moves into an empty lot or first discovers a new place to go. In this case, we would be calling lichens our pioneers because they are the pioneer species that first go onto a bare rock surface and can actually latch on and start growing. Go ahead and choose an answer here. It says ecological succession ends when A, biodiversity is lowest, B, lichens and mosses dominate, C, animals begin to use plant resources, or D, a climax community has been reached. The answer is when a climax community has been reached. That is the end point and the point that is stable and lasts a really long time until some other huge natural disaster or human impact comes through and changes up the ecosystem. Secondary succession in a little bit more detail starts in a place where there already is soil. So it's a lot faster because you don't have to wait like the hundreds and thousands of years it takes to make the soil in the first place, because you're waiting on lichen to kind of do life and death cycles of growing, dying to break down rock and then turn into like nutritious soil. Here, the soil's already there. If there is already soil, what is not a pioneer species in secondary succession? A, trees, B, lichens, C, ferns, and D, mosses. The answer here would be lichens, right? Lichens are pioneer species only in primary succession. We do not use the term pioneer species when we talk about secondary succession because the land's already cultivated. You're not going into a brand new place where nobody has ever lived because secondary succession happens with somebody or something or an ecosystem already existed there, but it got destroyed. So this is what it kind of looks like where you have an established climax community, but then an event happens that destroys it. So it's no longer like this old stable community that's been there for years and years and years and years. An example could be like a forest fire that kind of decimates everything, but the soil is still there, right? After the soil is still there, Fast plants that can go and take up space real quickly and shoot up really quickly and grow, those are going to be the ones that first hop in, and they dominate because nothing's in their way. However, once time has passed and the seeds of taller plants have sown into the ground and are growing from the rain, then as they grow taller, they start blocking out the sunlight from the other plants that were there first. And eventually a climax community is reestablished when the large, tall organisms that can last for a really long time are resituated in that environment. Technically, this cycle can continually happen as long as it's continually being disturbed by some kind of natural disaster or by human impact. Ideally, though, for the ecosystem, they would, reach a climax community and then stay like that forever. But you can't control that. In these two images, I'm going to ask that you drag a red circle to show where primary succession is occurring and drag a blue circle to where secondary succession is occurring. You have answer choices A and B to drag your circles onto. As a tip, if you're still struggling, you want to ask yourself, is soil still present? Because if soil, S, is present, then it is S, secondary succession. So as a comparison again, the two types of succession are primary and secondary succession. And primary succession starts in a no-life area. It's bare rock, might be a newly formed island from a volcano. And lichen is always the pioneer species that will create the soil from the rock. So this takes a long time. Secondary succession starts with soil. You can remember the S and the S. It happens a lot faster because you're not building soil. Okay. So let's do a practice problem. Here we have Enchanted Rocks State Natural Area is located in Central Texas. It is a dome of granite. The area contains 4 easily identifiable communities. The table describes characteristics of each type of community in the area. So we have open oak woodland, we have mesquite grassland, we have floodplain, and we have granite rock. Now the question is asking, a student studying primary succession should focus on which of these communities? Open oak woodland, mesquite grassland, floodplain, or granite rock? Now, the actual part that we want to do is first read and highlight. So you're going to go ahead and highlight the important parts. Obviously, this entire table is really important. You're going to rephrase the question. And the question is specifically asking if a student is studying primary succession, they're going to want to focus on which of these 4 places. Now, the knowledge that we're going to use is that we know that primary succession always starts from bare rock. So if primary succession starts from bare rock, we're going to want to look for one of these communities that is bare rock. Therefore, we can eliminate open oak woodland because there's oaks, cacti, and some scattered grasses. We can eliminate mesquite grassland because there's trees and grasses. We can eliminate floodplain because there's trees, shrubs, grasses, and flowers. And we're going to settle on our answer as D, granite rock, because it's got lichen patches, the pioneer species are there already. So if you're going to study primary succession, you're going to want to study from the bare rock and from the pioneer species starting up and see where it goes from there. Now, following you have, I think, 1, 2, and just 2 questions to work on. The reason is because after today, we're going to do kind of a summary review of everything we've done up until today, because today is day 5. We're about halfway through our review, a little less. So following doing these 2 problems on here, you're going to do a Kahoot review. You'll see the link in one of the posts below here. And that Kahoot is going to cover kind of the topics that we have been talking about from day 1 all the way until now, day 5. You're going to do the Kahoot, and then that grade will go into your grade book as an assignment. And then that is the end of what you have today. There is no exit ticket. The Kahoot will